You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. Seattle's always been cool. We here in the Emerald City know that. But the rest of the world really took notice starting in the 90s when music made here reshaped what played on the radio and what sold at record stores everywhere. Artist Bootsy Holler joined that punk and grunge scene while it was taking off, and she documented the genesis of the post-grunge independent music boom of the early 2000s. She photographed many of the bands that would go on to define the indie scene, like Death Cab for Cutie, Fleet Foxes, Gossip, Interpol, and more. Whether the bands were on stage or in a portrait, her photos are full of movement, life, and quirk. When you see them, you feel like you can almost hear the microphone feedback and smell the sweaty crowd at the Crocodile or El Corazon. Her new book is called Making It, an intimate documentary of the Seattle indie, rock, and punk scene, 1992 to 2008. And she's here in studio with me now. Bootsy Holler, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So is that what you were going for with this book, that we would smell the sweat off the page?
I think that's just what I was always trying to get in my photos. Something different, something that vibrated. And how do you make a picture sing? How do you make a picture have feeling? And so that's what I was always striving for.
So this is a coffee table book. It's full of awesome images. We were talking before we got on that I just happened to be flipping through, and one of the images of a crowd scene, I saw a friend of mine. Like it brought me back to that early 2000s music scene and the just excitement of seeing like Modest Mouse like becoming what it became. For you, this started in 1992 when you arrived. You had a degree from Western Washington in textile and fiber art. And you're like 23, you're like 22 or something.
22 probably.
Yeah. So what is life like for you at that point? And what are you observing in this scene that was the Seattle music scene back then?
It felt even more for me at that moment underground, like other. It wasn't big. It was very small. And my boyfriend at the time had a band. So I was walking in back through the back door, carrying whatever, drumsticks or equipment. And then kind of they played and I was there. And at some point, I finally got myself a good camera so that I could actually document. But the moment I came down here, I didn't even have a really good camera to shoot with. So my goal was to get a camera. So, but at that moment I was, going to shows on Tuesday night at the off ramp and, there's 15 people there. It was very small and intimate. And then when you start shooting in that, nobody tells you to stop and you kind of know everybody that's there. So it was I just walked in.
So most of what we see in the book is film. Is that true?
Mostly,
or some of it is digital? Because you were in that transition period.
I would say 95% of the work in that book is film.
What was that process like going back through your old negatives? Or did you have a lot of that in print?
So I started in 2016. It probably took me 7 years to really find an edit of, a mass of photos that told a story. And then I probably spent, 2.5 years designing the book. And then when I decided to write, that just added a whole nother level to it, to tell my story. Because, what story can you tell that's different than anyone else's? It's often your own.
Do you mind if I read a little bit of what you wrote here? And it was about the very early days.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So here's from early in the book. I lived it. The dark days, the rain, the dampness in your bones, the thrift shop flannels. I supported local venues, lived with a band, drank the best coffee, shot heroin, got pregnant, and had an abortion. Not necessarily in that order. This book is a piece of my life while trying to make it, stay alive, and survive as an artist, just like all these musicians. Man, that just took me to a young woman, just really, as you say, trying to become a working artist, and you did it, but it took a lot of work. I mean, what did it take back then to become a working artist, to become somebody who could sustain yourself?
So I started out, I had a different small business, and I ran that small business so that I could afford to freelance whenever I wanted and take jobs. And then within 5 years, I was able to let go of that business and then strictly freelance. And for me, I kept saying, like, listen, you either hustle and get a job, whatever it is. It could be babies, rock stars, weddings, or you spend hours building a resume and trying to get a waitress job or a job in a corporate place, which I just couldn't do. I mean, I was offered a job as a secretary at this law firm, and I turned it down because I felt sick. I was like, I literally physically could not do it. And I turned around and I went and got food stamps and I started freelancing. And I was just like, there's no way to do it but to go straight in and do it. And what I often tell people is it's really scary to stand on the edge and think about jumping. But once you jump, you have no other option than to flap your wings and go for it. I assisted in New York for a little bit as a second assistant, and I came back to Seattle. I assisted once for a wedding photographer and once for a guy shooting a band. And I was like, I can do that. In fact, I can do that better. I can style. I have relationships with people. People trust me. And I didn't have time to climb a ladder. I just started right in the middle and started building.
Hmm. You didn't have the formal training. You really are self-taught. And again, you were hustling and had a network, and you were able to kind of build this career for yourself. Can you tell me about this photo? It's a 1996 photo that you include in the book, and it's of the front woman of 7 Year Bitch, Celine Vigil. She is in this photo. She's topless. She has her arms folded in front of her. She's got sunglasses on. She's got this cool, dirty blonde bob, track pants. She's got the choker around her neck because it is the 90s. Mm-hmm. And you write that this was the first musician that you ever approached for a formal portrait whom you did not know personally.
Yeah.
What was that like? Were you intimidated?
I wasn't intimidated. I was just like, I gotta find the moment. If you're gonna step in and talk to somebody, you gotta weave and bob, and you gotta know when to strike. And like, people are talking to her, everybody's around her. I don't think she was even playing that night. She just was at the bar. And I was like, she would be cool to photograph. And so I kind of weaved and bobbed, and I got in next to her and just kind of alter egoed myself into being like, hey, I'm a photographer. I would love to do a portrait of you. And she just looked at me and was like, yes. And I was, at that moment, I said, oh, this changes everything. Like, the fact that I'm a woman and I can approach a woman, there's a level of safety that people feel and can feel. And I always want, man or woman, I always want everybody to feel safe and secure with me. And I'm going to guide them through a photo shoot, and I'm going to tell them what I like and what I don't like. And if they're nervous, I do everything I can to get them to also believe that they are the most beautiful and that the beauty comes from the inside. And that if they show that to me, if they give it to me because I see it and I tell them I see it, then it will resonate through the page. You know, that was a huge turning point for me, to just realize that it was actually an asset for me to be a woman in a time when, it was very male dominated, and so was the music industry. And at that time in the 90s, women at least had the right to take care of our body. And I did. And this book wouldn't be here today if I wouldn't have been able to make choices for my body at that time at age 22.
There's a foreword in the book in which a colleague photographer and author, Charles Peterson, who has taken some of, the iconic photos that we know of, like Kurt Cobain and stuff, he writes about your work and he says, "What immediately pops out to me is the smiles. Even if the subjects are not actually smiling, you can tell it's lurking there under the veneer of cool that musicians love to hide behind. She could tease one out of the best of them and has smartly featured many of those here." You kind of alluded a little bit to it when you talked about how you approached Celine Vigil for that portrait. But what is the secret to kind of teasing out the personality of somebody who's really trying to kind of stick to a mask of cool?
I mean, I'll often ask people, like, how do you want to be perceived? What is it that you want? Are you trying to be cool, slick, skinny? I mean, what is it that you want? Do you want to be silly? Do you want to be serious? And so in that, it's giving them the authority to be whatever it is, and that I'm on their team.
They trust you.
And yeah, get the trust, And a lot of times it was like, bring me clothes and I'm going to pick your clothes out for you. I mean, Carrie Ockrey will say, I would have never worn those socks. Bootsy put me in those socks and she put that flower on my neck. But it makes the photo. And, so she and I worked a lot together as a team. And I like to work as a team to get you what you want, and often it's just communication. And I think even as a still photographer, you have to be a really good director.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what helps people trust you.
Why do you think, I feel like the conversation about grunge is kind of, something that we've heard before about why there was this moment in Seattle, but I don't think I've ever heard anybody quite capture the transition in the music scene, like post-grunge and into the indie scene. What was it about that moment and like that mixing of personalities? And, there's of course like labels, there's Sub Pop that, was a big part of that. But why do you think that was such a successful like springboard for so many bands?
Well, one of my thoughts is, and I don't know if this is real or not, but because of the underage 21, you couldn't have underage shows in Seattle. I think that pushed all the kids outside. It also took them away from being able to see the grunge movement and things like that. And a lot of those kids grew up in the suburbs and became Murder City Devils or Modest Mouse, And I think for me, I see it as an FU to kind of that style, and we're going to do something different, and we're going to rebel against what was happening in front of our face here and go the opposite. And I also think that that scene, the grunge scene, caused all these kids all over America, if they wanted to do music, what'd they do? They came to Seattle, they went to school, or they got a house, and they were just here, all of them. And it was just like an incubator for something new to happen. And it did.
What did it mean that was sort of like the last generation without smartphones and without like recording absolutely everything? Like, is there something special about you being a photographer in a moment? Digital cameras were starting to be more ubiquitous, and like eventually we got phones, but you were documenting this period right before basically everything would end up online. Every moment of everyone's like from, baby on. Like, do you find that to be, is there something special about being kind of like the last of that period of time before everything became social media?
I guess that's why I put the book together. Part of the reason why I put the book together is I was like, oh, this was a special time. There was something happening, and it was pre the phone, right? And so when I went to a show, I was usually the only person there with a camera. And now, and I think also because I took the work I was doing serious enough, even though I didn't know this work was ever going to be a book or ever mean anything, I still archived all my work and all my negatives. And today, everybody's shooting, but nobody's printing. Everybody's shooting, but nobody's archiving. Everybody's shooting, even film is coming back in, and the kids will say, I'll take the scans, you can destroy my negatives. If I would have done something like that, this book wouldn't exist. You just don't know. You don't know until you're out of it that you may have been inside of something.
Okay, we need to take a quick break. You are listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman, and I'm talking with photographer Bootsy Holler about her book, Making It, an intimate documentary of the Seattle indie, rock, and punk scene 1992 to 2008. Coming up, Bootsy's favorite show she ever saw in Seattle and photographing Pearl Jam at a surprise West Seattle show. That's coming up in a minute on KUOW. Welcome back to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. My guest is the photographer Bootsy Holler, whose new book chronicles a period when much of the music industry bent towards the Pacific Northwest. It's called Making It, an intimate documentary of the Seattle indie, rock, and punk scene 1992 to 2008. Can I ask you about one photo that stood out to me? And this is maybe, from not the indie generation, the grunge generation, but it's Eddie Vedder at Easy Street, and it's like a fisheye lens, and it's he's like sweaty and kind of leaning over the guitar, and there's like a kinetic energy to it. It's obvious that Easy Street is not a huge place, and they're playing this secret show. Can you tell me about that shot? How you got that shot?
Well, I was asked to shoot this Coalition of Independent Music Stores 10-year anniversary event by Nicole Vandenberg, who's an amazing woman, and she worked with Pearl Jam for many years in publicity. And I was like, well, I'm going to be just standing literally in front of the band. Like, it's so small. I mean, it's not even as big as a normal small venue. So I think I rented that fisheye lens because I thought, well, just in case. And I often didn't shoot with a flash because I didn't want to ruin the ambiance. And so it's very warm. You can see the guitars moving. His hand is blurry. There's sweat dripping off his nose. But I was also able to get the whole entire band in there. You can see the playlist on the floor. And they did end up using some of these images on their Easy Street live recording of this show.
Do you know in the moment when you're in something like that and there's so much happening, like, do you know if you got it, or do you have to look later and see what is, in your
Well, if I'm
camera?
shooting digital, sure, I can be like, oh, this is working or this isn't. But I can look at the light outside and be like, oh, I should be shooting at f11 at 125. You do it so much, you start to know, okay, I got to shoot wide open at a 30th. And, that's just the way it is that's tech talk. But it's like you start to just understand what works and what doesn't. And I did so much experimenting and playing during when I was shooting for other events, because a lot of times I wasn't shooting a job. I was just out shooting because those were my friends, and having a camera with me was like kind of having a friend with me. And, it also was a little bit of a protection, like I'm working, I'm not drinking, I'm like, I can say hi to people and talk to people, but at the same time be like, I'm doing something else, and then I could shoot the show and just walk out. I often wouldn't go with anybody. I knew enough people when I'd go out. I didn't really have to bring a friend, especially when I had my camera. And they sure let you in a lot more places, the bouncers, when you don't have an entourage.
Yeah. I've heard I guess this was, I don't know if you've followed the career of Ken Griffey Jr. after he quit Major League Baseball. He retired, but he's become a photographer, and he says
Awesome.
he always brings his camera now to like his kids' baseball games
Yeah.
so that nobody bothers, because it's like he's doing something,
Yeah.
you know, he's in the middle of, he's working basically.
Yeah, you're protected.
Yeah, it's like a force field.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that for sure. And it's also just like, it does become your friend and kind of a guard, a shield in a way, you know.
Can I ask you about Beth Ditto and Gossip?
Oh,
because
yeah.
that was life-changing for me back in the early and mid 2000s. What was it like to see them become, you know, what they became? I had so many. She was my soundtrack to like snowboarding in the early 2000s, and just kind of like poppy, but also punk and like unapologetically queer, and just like so fabulous, and you know, a bigger bodied woman just freaking owning the stage. Tell me more about seeing that kind of crystallize.
I love the Gossip. I would go whenever I could see them. I would go see them. I mean, talk about having somebody amazing to take photos of. They just were such powerful shows, and not only the shows, but the energy that she would put out on stage and that voice. I mean, I'd follow that girl anywhere. She's just amazing. She was one of my, you know, favorite bands to shoot. There aren't very many people that make it into the book twice. And the Gossip made it in there twice. And, but yeah, that's about it. So I had to really cut. It was hard to cut. Like, I had to give myself rules, you know? Okay, everybody only gets one image, you know? And so that I had to decide, and because it's 208-page book, and there's lots of bands and people got left out. And some photos I was like, I love that band, or I love Wilco, but that photo's not the best. It's like, it's okay, but there's nothing cool about it, you know? So
but you're not
going
to include it just because you need one of Wilco or whatever.
Yeah, I was like, does it drive the story? I really had to build a story because I'm not relying on Nirvana. So I really had to think, do I have a story here? And what is the story I can tell? And so the book is broken up into like 3 chunks. There's the beginning of the book, which is all black and white, all Northwest artists. The middle is a mix of color. It's all color. And the last part is all black and white bands that are not from the Northwest. And then once they got broken up into their sections, I was like, where can I break the rules in each section? And then I layered my story in between. The rest was just more documentary stuff and about me as an artist, or about the photos, or how you get, like, you could be a photographer and look at the book and be like, how'd she do that? And I talk about it. Or you can, you know, be a person of history or culture, and you could look at it as a time and place and why it was important. You could be a musician, you know. So I wanted to teach people and let them learn a little bit of something about a lifestyle and a living a certain way, and not giving a crap what other people think, and being really strong with my personal style, and knowing that even if I was different, that was what was actually better.
Was there a moment when you were compiling all these photos and maybe rediscovering something that you had like forgotten about or not thought about in a while, that like put you back at that show, or put you back at that moment backstage, or whatever it might be? Was there like anything that really felt like a discovery to you, or a nice revisiting to you, that you want to highlight?
Yeah, nothing's a discovery, because I am so visual that I know where everything lives in the binders. It's all in my head visually. So I can say, oh, I know that show was there or that. But in my mind, I have all the photos. So the biggest one that I was like, kind of made me think back was the photo of Macklemore, because when I saw them play at KEXP at Bumbershoot, and I was there shooting, I couldn't even tell who was the lead singer. I didn't know whose band it was. I was like, I don't know what's going on here. There's so many people on stage, and I didn't even know who's the lead singer. Like, I didn't even know who to shoot. And
this is Macklemore and Ryan Lewis in 2006.
Yes,
yeah, Bumbershoot at a small stage. Yeah,
he had footies on. He's got to be like, I can't believe he was wearing footies. He had no shoes on, just had little footy socks on, cargo shorts, and this striped T-shirt, and that was it. And I really only had 3 or 4 shots of him. So even though I knew I had that, when I looked back and thought about, wow, he was barely anything at that moment. He was on the cusp of, getting on KEXP was probably a big deal, and getting to play at Bumbershoot was a huge deal. And then 14 years later, like, is one of the biggest independent people, is crazy. So for that, he was the only one where I really looked back and was like, wow. But it's the same thing. Like, I knew Reggie Watts. I was like, wow, look where Reggie went. Look where Beth went. Like, it is kind of, it's in, look where Death Cab is now, It's like, I saw Death Cab. I don't even know if they were probably Death Cab for Cutie at that point. Like, Chris and Ben must have come down for New Year's Eve, and they were playing at a loft. Maybe they still lived in Bellingham.
Ben Gibbard and Chris Walla.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And they played at this New Year's Eve party on Capitol Hill up in some loft. And I just remember, like, and they had their guitars, and I was like, oh, these guys are cool.
Best show you ever saw in Seattle or the Seattle area? Anything come to mind?
I mean, there's so many good shows I've seen. Like, it's not, but probably like PJ Harvey. Way, way back. PJ Harvey. I was a huge fan,
Do you remember what the venue was?
I want to say it was something weird, like, could have been the Rock Candy. I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I have a visual, and the visual feels like it's in that area. So if it wasn't Rock Candy, it was some other kind of random venue, but...
You brought me back to when the Crocodile was the bar in the back of the Crocodile.
Yes.
And it had the pole in the middle of the stage, or in the middle of the floor, not on the stage, but,
the leaning pole.
Yeah, yeah. That was a lot of the venues that you're chronicling here. Yeah, it really brought me back. It was so nice.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and there's not even a green room at the Crocodile at that point. You had to just be out sitting in a booth, or... the fact that you had to walk around a complete C shape or U shape to get to the bar to get a drink. It's just insane.
I think I was using my fake ID back then, so I wasn't even chancing it at the bar.
Just going to see the show.
Just getting into the show was a big deal.
That's awesome. Oh, I love it.
Bootsy Holler, anything else you want to add about this project? I mean, it was such a joy to page through the photos, and as I mentioned, I found a friend of mine at the front of one of the shows. It was just such a head trip. Anything that you want to leave people with, just your intention for the book or the story that you were telling here with these wonderful photos?
I mean, the deep story inside of it is really how do you as an artist keep making the work, keep producing, keep creating when you're not really making money off it, How do you have the passion, or where does that passion come from to keep creating, even when you're not making the money, or even when you haven't really made it, right? And some of these people didn't make it, and they're outstanding musicians and beautiful people and have amazing voices. And, everybody has their path, I guess. But how do you have the passion to keep making the work and keep creating, and not giving up and making it because it's what makes you happy.
Bootsy Holler, photographer, artist. Her new book is called Making It, an intimate documentary of the Seattle indie, rock, and punk scene, 1992 to 2008. It's been really fun talking with you, Bootsy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I love it. This was easy.
Thanks for listening to Soundside. Don't forget you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org or on your favorite podcast app.